very much for coming along this evening. Some of you I know were at the meeting in Sallydoggin last week, which was absolutely packed out. And we did some people who went here for that as well. So it could be that people went up there because we've had really packed out meetings across the place, and you know it's strange to see not as big a crowd. But I mean there are a lot of people around the county who've been at meetings over the last week on this already, and we're having another couple of meetings in the next few days. Our speaker here tonight is going to be Richard, but really it's just about maybe getting used to kind of butt in and join in the discussion. So Richard will give a bit of an introduction, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Okay?
Okay, well thanks everybody for coming. Who has been at other meetings in the area so far? Most people?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't really need to tell you what we're campaigning against. I mean, for the few that haven't been to other meetings, our position and the position of the Right to Water campaign, which I want to stress is a broad alliance that has been constructed over the last while, which includes people before profit. It also includes Sinn Féin, some of whom are here today, some of the trade unions, not all of the trade unions, but some of the trade unions, Mandate, Unite, CPSU. We're hoping the Communication Workers Union is going to get on board, a few of the smaller unions, the Plasterers Union and so on. So it's an assembling coalition, and then a lot of just groups who are organising across the country, independent, who aren't affiliated to anything in particular, but who are beginning to get organised in communities the length and breadth of the country really at this stage. There isn't a county and hardly a town in the country that is not beginning to mobilise now against the planned introduction of water charges. So that's what the meetings we've held is about trying to assemble that coalition at a local level to conduct a very serious fight against the introduction of water charges. The argument for why we should do that, I think, should be obvious, and probably is obvious to everybody here. The idea that you would have to pay to access something that you need to exist is, to our mind, a pretty disgusting proposition. Water, even in international law, is a human right. It's something you need to live, and the idea that people will be afraid to turn on the shower, to wash, to stay, clean and hygienic, to keep their house clean, whatever it is, all the multiple uses of water which we need to actually live a sort of dignified, hygienic existence, the thought that people would not be able to access them if they can't afford whatever it is Irish Water is going to charge is a disgusting idea. So that's really, I think, what is driving a revolt across the country against these charges, and is certainly our inspiration in trying to get a campaign up and running against them. And the other thing I suppose we want to stress to people is that it only starts here if they succeed in getting the charges in. People were asking me downstairs, where do you think this is going? How much do you think you can be paying ultimately? At the moment, the government are talking about an average charge of €248 a year. But the Irish Water is set up, even though the only shareholder at the moment is the government, the Minister for Finance. Legally, it is set up as a private company, and it has a commercial mandate. In other words, it has to make money. And the agreement with the Troika was that it had to raise a certain amount of money, which is about €500 million a year. It has to raise that money, and it is legally required to do so. Now, if it is required, and it is required, that Irish Water is self-financing and ultimately profitable, in that sense, the real cost, if you average it out per household, per user or household, is about €650 per year. That's what they will actually have to get to, and will be legally required to do so at current levels. So 248, they're pitching it a bit lower at the beginning, but that's where they have to get to. And the other important thing to stress is that because they are required to get a certain amount of money, if we reduce usage, because that's one of their justifications, their claims is, we want you to conserve water, we don't want you to waste it. But in reality, because they have to raise a fixed amount of money, if you reduce the amount that you use, because there's a charge on it, they will have to increase the price in order to reach their target. They have to do that. They mightn't do it for the first year or two until they try, force us all into paying, but rapidly that's what will happen. And they will have to do that. It's not us saying it. It is in the legal mandate and in the Troika agreement they've made. So that is where it's heading. And of course, once you head down that road, the government is also saying, oh, we won't privatise it, we'll keep it public. But of course, once you head down that sort of road, inevitably, the pressure will be on to privatise. In fact, again, EU law, to a large extent, will dictate that it will have to move towards privatisation, because private water providers will be able to say, well, it's an unfair market, because you know what all the EU laws about markets and all that kind of stuff, it's not, there has to be free access into this market now that water is something that can produce revenue, right? We want the right to access that market. So the pressure will be on for private companies pushing to come into the market. And that's exactly what happened with bins. I mean, for a period, you had charges levied by the local authority, but then the pressure came on from private operators wanting to access the market. They had to be allowed in. Then the council operation became uncommercial, unprofitable, because they were carrying other costs, which the private operators didn't have to carry, and very quickly the council said, well, actually we can't afford to run refuse collection anymore, and the whole thing was handed over to private operators, and then the waivers were done away with, and we know where all that led, right? Now the bags you get are smaller, and the cost goes up, right? That's the direction this will head, and there's nowhere in the world where they've introduced charges for water that privatisation hasn't come very, very quickly on its heels. So to my mind, that is a very alarming scenario, and I think for most people that is an alarming scenario, that's where we could head with all this. So for that reason, we want to fight. But our capacity to defeat this, I think, is the big issue that everybody is discussing. And even those who were at some of the previous meetings, this is a bit smaller than some of the ones we've had, but maybe that's a more useful discussion we can have. And the thing we want to stress is this is not going to be won with one demonstration or in a couple of weeks. This is a battle that we're looking at for at least the next year, year and a half, which will decide whether or not they get away with this or not, or whether we win and force them to abolish the charges. Can it be done? Well, I certainly think it can be done because it's been done before. They tried to introduce water charges in the 1980s. There was a big campaign against it, which had many different facets, but it was a massive campaign. It had majority support. The charges were defeated. Eamon Gilmore at the time, remember him, was actually a leading light in that campaign. He's joined the other side now, but at the time claimed a lot of the credit for defeating water charges. In the 1990s, again, they actually introduced water charges. People were sent bills, but there was a big, big national campaign of protest, of boycott, of demonstrations outside the courts when they tried to take a few people to the courts. And that pressure, combined with the election of some anti-water charges candidates in some areas, gave the government a fright, and they decided to abolish. Right? So it has been done before, and therefore it can be done before, or it can be done again. But there's no guarantee we can beat it, and there's no doubt there's quite a lot of determination by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and Labour to ram this through. So we are in a fight, and our capacity to win that fight is really dependent on people power. And there's a lot of stuff people want to discuss about the different tactics. I'm sure we can discuss that today, but there's no one tactic, in my opinion, that will win it. I think there's a whole range of tactics we're seeing. We're seeing people sending back the forms with no consent on it. We're seeing people burn them. There's a lot of people saying they're not going to pay. There's a massive protest this Saturday, which is very, very important. We need huge numbers on the streets. But really the key to this, because there's going to be many twists and turns in this fight over the next year, the government will try all sorts of tactics to lure us in or frighten us. And our ability to win through is going to be dependent on our capacity to organise all those people who are angry about this across the country, to respond to whatever they do, and to escalate the resistance over the coming year in a very serious way, to the point where the government becomes so frightened that they abolish the water charges, or that any incoming government will be forced to pledge before the next election that, we're going to get rid of these charges. Now that's going to take a lot of pressure, considering Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour have all signed up to water charges. Some of the opposition, the left, Sinn Féin and so on, have pledged that they will remove these water charges, but there's still quite a battle to see does that actually happen. And we all, we know promises can be broken and so on. The key is you've got to have the movement on the ground that makes it unbearable for the political establishment not to abolish them. And that is really the task ahead of us. In the short term, what we are proposing, but it's going to be up to people to sort of decide the tactics, and we want you as much involvement as you're willing and able to give into the process of building this campaign. But for the time being, the proposals we have are the following. One, that the demonstration on Saturday, we need a massive show of strength before the budget to really make it clear to the government and to everybody out there who's wavering and isn't sure, is there a serious chance of beating this? We need a big show of strength on Saturday. Now the signs are very, very good. We at the beginning thought if we get 5, maybe 10,000 we'll be happy. When we started the build-up for the demonstration, I think it's going to easily make 10,000 and probably 15 or 20,000. There's buses coming from all over the country. There's a serious mobilisation happening. It could even go beyond that, right? That will be a serious statement. The by-election in South West, I don't know who exactly is going to win it, but whoever does win it is absolutely clear it's going to be an anti-water charges candidate. And it is absolutely clear out in Tallaght that the only issue people are talking about is water. So the government this weekend are going to face a massive demonstration against water charges, and they are going to face the loss of a seat in Tallaght on the issue of water. And almost certainly the issue that will decide the election in Roscommon is also water, because these people are going to be charged for water they can't even drink, incredibly, right? It is a massive, massive issue, but this weekend's demonstration will be important. Beyond that, we are saying that there needs to be a national coordinated day of local protests. I mean, you can only bring people to Dublin city centre so many times, it's difficult for people. So Saturday is a big national demonstration, but after that, and the date that is now being proposed is the 1st of November by the national sort of steering group of the campaign, is the 1st of November to aim for demonstrations all over the country on the same day. So that we give local communities the chance to mobilise in their area, and that would happen. That would be a very, very powerful thing to happen everywhere across the country on the same day. There's also plans then to have a sort of an assembly once we get local groups established like this group. We have one in Ballybrack now, and we have one in Cllr, and we have one in Loughlinstown, and so on, and we're setting them up all over the country. That's been repeated in every other area as well, I want to stress. That we then have delegates who will meet at some sort of national assembly to decide where we go from there. One of the big issues that people obviously are concerned about is these forms and whether or not you should send them back. Our view is that certainly at this stage you should not do it. I mean, personally I don't think we should cooperate with them at all, but we obviously need to decide that collectively. There are potential consequences if you don't do it, in that they're saying that you won't get your free allowances and therefore your bill could be higher, right? And that's a threat, they hope, to bully people into filling out these forms, sending in PPS numbers and all the rest of it. But I think people's confidence to face them down on that, and for them maybe to buckle on that deadline and on those demands, depends on how many people resist them. And the important piece of information in that regard is, even though the deadline has been set as the 31st of October, in fact in the legislation it says you can still get the allowance of 60 days after that. So the real deadline is the 30th of December. And what would be a very powerful thing is for us to go over the 31st of October deadline and right up close at least to the 30th of December, and be able to say, well, 1 million people haven't sent back their registration forms. Right? Then they have a real problem. And then between now and then, for us to decide as a national movement, are we going to go beyond that as well? Are we going to refuse to hand it back even by that deadline? Which personally I would favour, but that's a decision people are going to have to make, knowing the full details and the consequences. And it'll also be a little bit clearer what the government are threatening at that stage if you do that, right? Another issue that, again, we need to think about and discuss is the issue of meters. People have been fighting in many, many parts of the country against the installation of meters. And I certainly think it's been tremendous that people have done that. They've made life very, very difficult for Irish Water. And I know in some areas you've had sort of clashes with guards, low-level clashes, let's be honest. But in many parts of the country, when they see the protesters, they just go. So they see this causing significant problems for them sticking down the meters. But again, this is a decision we have to make in every area. Is this what we want to do? And again, be aware that there are potential consequences. If the meter doesn't go down, you will still get a bill, and that bill will be an estimated bill. Whether it's higher or lower than what you would get otherwise will depend a little bit probably on the size of your family and all that kind of stuff. But personally, again, I think it is worth resisting them on this, because of course if they get the meters in, then they have more commitment to driving the whole thing through. But that's something we have to decide collectively. Equally on the issue of payment or non-payment, and we're not going to be faced with that question until we get the bills in January and then whatever deadline they set for the payment of those bills. But what is important for people to know is they cannot take it out of your wages or your social welfare. This is not the same as the property tax. It's not being done by revenue, it's not being done by a state agency, it's being done by what is legally a private utility company. And what's interesting is that at the beginning of this process, Hogan said, the then minister, that if you didn't pay, we would cut off your water. They quickly backtracked on that. Partly because they may have been on dodgy legal ground, but also because there was outrage at the thought they would cut water off. So they backed off that. The next thing they said is we're going to put a trickle cap outside your house, which will reduce the flow of water to a trickle. Interestingly, yesterday or the day before, the Irish Water spokesperson on Sean O'Rourke was quizzed again and again by Sean O'Rourke, what are you going to do if people don't pay? And she didn't mention trickle caps once or reducing the flow, and said categorically we won't be cutting people off. We'll pursue them in the normal way, she said, that a utility company pursues you, which leaves it a bit open. Now what that signal sends to me is they're getting worried. They can see the scale of revolt on the ground, the government are frightened, Irish Water are frightened, and they're not quite sure what to do if large numbers of people don't pay. So I personally think that should give us confidence that it's possible. But again, this is a decision we have to make individually and collectively if we want to go down that road. But it's a decision we would be in a far better position to make if we're well organised at a national level and connected at a national level, where we know that if I make the decision not to pay, that there's going to be 500,000 people doing it with me. Because then they have a much bigger problem and we have confidence that we're not alone. So that is basically the project. And to absolutely conclude, what we hope is people will sign up to the Right to Water campaign, that they will bill for the demonstration on Saturday, but also that they will commit to be part of a Right to Water group here in this area and try and build that group. And ideally, if people here are willing to play a part in helping coordinate that. I mean, this meeting has been organised by Sinn Féin and People Before Profit and a few activists. We need ordinary people who are not affiliated to any particular political party, but who are angry at this to say, yeah, I'm going to help out with this. Because if it's going to work, it's going to take that level of participation. So we're hoping people might volunteer themselves to be part of that and make it a broad, big, well-organised coalition that will fight this thing here in Dún Laoghaire, but also link in with the bigger national movement against the charges. If we do that, we think it is possible to defeat this thing. So I'll leave it at that and open it up to you.
Okay. Can I just say that there's a bus on Saturday going into town. It's €5 a seat on the bus for the CIE bus, holds 74 people. So if you pay a fiver, the bus will bring you in, and then we give the bus driver a time, we go back and get back on the bus. So that's open. I have a Facebook page, Phil Maher, or Sally Noggin Against Water. There's phone numbers on that and whatever, if you need to get in touch. Also, I belong to a thing called Hub, where people have given me their phone numbers, and if the water meters come, they don't want them at their premises, there are people that will gather and go down and help you, like just peaceful protests outside or whatever. So just to let you know, that's all.
That's great.
And just that bus is living in Monkstown Farm, isn't it? For
It's going to do pickups, it's going to do McDonald's and Dalkey.
It says on Facebook it's picking up at 1 o'clock on Monkstown Farm.
Well, just
10 to 1.
Yeah.
10 to 1 at Monkstown, Loughlinstown, Dalkey and Glassville, I think.
And Castle.
The benefit
And
of
Castle,
Airbnb
yeah.
Monkstown.
Yeah, this will be the last stop before town.
People should talk to you or look at the Facebook page afterwards.
Yeah, my name's Phil Maher and I'm on Facebook if you need to get me.
That's brilliant, Phil. Yourself there?
I'd just like to make a very relevant point about the assets that actually Irish, they're in negotiation between the local authorities and Irish Water, is the assets of the local authorities, which is us, right? That would be something like the pumping station down the west here. I think there's about 5 acres there. Say like the sewage works in Rathdown, just there in Tiny Beach. I can't quite remember, I had a rough week there, but I worked it out there about 2 weeks ago, something like 89 acres or something like that, right? There's something like Barrett Reservoir. What's that worth? You know? And the guy who actually bought the land for Barrett Reservoir, he bought 200 yards all around it to prevent an action like that, so that there's no way that nobody could take it. But unfortunately, the way we are now, and we're in a hiatus between the ownership of the assets between the local authority and Irish Water. And once Irish Water get their hands on those assets, the ball is in the air then. It's going to go to Wall Street, it's going to go to Moscow, it's going to go to Shanghai, the every financial capital in the world. Ireland is back for sale. That's one thing that a lot of people, it's not about a water charge, or it is very true, like I think you mentioned the figure 240. But I mean, the sky is the limit for what they will charge us.
Well, apparently for myself, the hubby, there's 4 adults in our house. At the end of the year, our bill will be €900. And there is no way of God's earth am I paying it when I already pay. I'm working 2 jobs to try and keep the family and all together. And they're taking me tax and whatever else, and I'm certainly, I don't care if I have to go to jail, I'll go. I am not giving Dennis O'Brien my hard-earned money to go back to America with and buy another $40 million yacht. Absolutely. They can fuck off.
Is there anyone else with any last